Welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I'm Dr. Kelly Livingston, a naturopathic physician and your guide to a new health reality, one that connects body, mind, and spirit. Together, we'll dive deep into the art and science of holistic healing. Through working with hundreds of women through midlife transitions, I've discovered something profound. Most of our physical and emotional challenges are rooted in a maladaptive stress response. And true healing begins when we regulate our nervous system. Each episode will explore complex health topics in simple, empowering ways, uncover the deeper wisdom within each of us, and share practical tools for nervous system regulation to help you awaken your vital force and create lasting wellness. So, if you're ready to reconnect with yourself, your health, and your purpose, let's begin this journey together so you can experience life more fully human and deeply healed. I want to begin today's episode with a quote from Dr. Deanna Minich, a nutrition scientist and functional medicine educator whose work I deeply respect. You can go check out her Instagram page and see all of the resources that she shares in her posts. So she wrote, "If you are choosing HRT, don't forget to optimize your HPA-GLOA, which stands for hypothalamic-pituitary-adrenal, gut, liver, ovarian, and adipose axes." Menopause is big right now, or maybe it's just finally out in the open. There are so many ways a woman can approach her menopausal journey. One of the dominant discussions is HRT, hormone replacement therapy. And yes, there are absolutely valid reasons to consider it. But what I'm observing far too often is a quick jump into HRT without first tending to the body's inner intelligence. That feels like a lot. The hypothalamus, pituitary, thyroid, adrenal, gut, liver, ovarian, adipose. It is your inner endocrine code, connecting you to the whole of you. The beautifully interlocking system that integrates sleep, stress, metabolism, detoxification, inflammation, hormone balance, and so much more. So if you're considering HRT, you may want to support the rest of your inner axis so you're not just treating a symptom, but honoring the whole system embedded within your being, carefully orchestrating your psychobiology. Hi, and welcome to the Vital Spirit podcast. I am Dr. Kelly Livingston, naturopathic physician and your guide on your health awakening journey. And I just love this quote so much because it perfectly captures what I see in my practice every single day. Women are being told their only option is HRT, or that it is a magical pill that every single woman needs, or that birth control, thyroid meds, or antidepressants, again, are the only option for their symptoms. But those are end products, not root causes. If we don't look upstream at the HPA axis, the hypothalamus-pituitary-adrenal connection, then we're missing the control tower, and that's where real healing begins. So in today's episode, part 1 of our deep dive into the HPA axis, I want to give you the framework that I use with my patients, why we start with the HPA axis before hormones, the labs I run, and a real case example that shows how often this gets missed. Because HRT can be a tool, but it's never the terrain. This is exactly why there's an order to the Vital Spirit method when I work with women. If you haven't listened to our episodes on the therapeutic order, this would be a great time to go back and listen to episodes 1 through 3 for some more background on what is essentially the order of operations in naturopathic medicine and when you work with me through the Vital Spirit method. So let's start with the big picture and break this down into more digestible bites. One of my central beliefs as a naturopathic physician is that midlife symptoms are not simply about ovarian decline. They're about endocrine system decline, the entire system. And if we remove obstacles to cure and we provide the conditions for health, women can absolutely thrive during this perimenopausal and menopausal transition. That's the point of this podcast, right? And when women are thriving and they have their health, they can change the world around them. So midlife changes are not just about the ovaries slowing down, which yes, the ovaries are. You're no longer ovulating. That's why progesterone starts to decline and then estrogen as well. But this is really about the entire neuroendocrine immune orchestra shifting. So what does that mean? If we start to monitor the instruments and the players in this orchestra prior to perimenopause, it is so much easier to keep our symphony in tune and playing at Carnegie Hall. As a cello player for most of my childhood and young adulthood, I really like this analogy because it's so true and I get to think about cellos, which I love. And the HPA axis is the conductor of this neuroendocrine immune orchestra. So it certainly deserves a whole pillar in the Vital Spirit method. And that's why I'm doing a two-part deep dive today. But most women are not ever given this framework of understanding. Instead, they're told, here's a pill for your period, here's a patch for your hot flashes, here's Synthroid for your thyroid, here's Zoloft for your mood. Now, I want to be clear. I'm not anti-medication. There are times when birth control, antidepressants, or hormone replacement therapy can be helpful tools. But when they are the only solution offered, when they're used as a one-size-fits-all fix, women get shortchanged. And if women are not informed of the side effects, how their HPA axis is impacted long-term, and the deficiencies that come along with these drugs, then that is not informed consent. And that's not how we practice here. Because hormones are messengers. They're not magic pills. Trust me, if there were a magic pill, I would be up on the magic. And if you only address the messengers, the musicians in the orchestra, without fixing the system that sends the message, the conductor of the orchestra, then you will always be chasing symptoms. And your symphony will drift out of tune, sounding more like an elementary school orchestra than the Philharmonic. I've seen this time and time again. Women show up in my office in tears, having been handed the same pill by yet another doctor who never asked them any questions. At Roots Deep Medicine, we obviously go a lot deeper. And when you're working through the lens of psychoneuroendocrino-immunology, which I'll talk about more in a minute, we're really talking about something called allostatic load. So you will constantly hear me talking in practice with women about chronic stress, inflammation, and sleep disruption, and how these are wearing down the system's ability to adapt. Essentially, they're lowering your threshold or your window of tolerance to stress. That wear and tear can show up in midlife as fatigue, mood changes, weight gain, autoimmune flares, brain fog, viral reactivations, like we talked about last week. So, when I talk about starting with the HPA axis, it's because this is the system that decides, do we prioritize survival right now, or do we have enough resources in our system for growth, repair, reproduction, joy? So if you're tired, moody, brain foggy, irritable, and dealing with low libido, this is definitely the episode for you. So what exactly is the HPA axis? We've talked about this before, right? I really love the conductor analogy, again, because I'm a cello nerd, but you can also think of the whole hypothalamic-pituitary-adrenal axis, HPA axis, like a control tower at an airport. So the hypothalamus is like the radar. It's constantly scanning your environment. Light, temperature, food intake, stress in the environment, connection with other nervous systems, safety cues. These are all of the inputs that the hypothalamus is scanning for. We've talked about this before. It's sensing from the body what hormones the body needs to go up or down, and it's sensing from the environment information such as light. The pituitary is like the air traffic control. So it's going to organize those signals that the hypothalamus is sensing and tell your glands what to do. So, for example, it signals to your thyroid to make thyroid hormone when the body is low on thyroid hormone. And it tells your adrenal glands to make cortisol to regulate your wake cycle, your sleep-wake cycle, your circadian rhythm, and to respond to stress. Then your adrenal glands are like the workers on the ground. So they're releasing cortisol, DHEA, epinephrine and norepinephrine, and other signals that set your rhythm for the day and help your body respond to stress. They're kind of like getting the suitcases on and off the plane or shipping resources to other places in the body. Now remember, cortisol is not just a stress hormone. It regulates your blood sugar, your circadian rhythm, your inflammation balance, your immune system, even how thyroid converts from T4 to T3, which is its more active form. So that's why we want to know, what does your cortisol curve look like throughout a day? Are you producing cortisol in the right amount at the right time? Or is your cortisol curve dysregulated, which is a sign of HPA axis dysfunction? Now, here's where pregnenolone comes in. You've heard me talk about this before. Pregnenolone is sometimes called the mother hormone. It's the raw material or the precursor that your body uses to make cortisol and progesterone, estrogens and testosterone, even neurosteroids that affect memory and mood. If you've ever been a patient of mine, we have talked all about this. You might have heard about the pregnenolone steal, and that's that idea that your body is stealing sex hormones to make cortisol, and that's not quite accurate. What's really happening is prioritization. So your body's really, really smart, right? If it feels unsafe and under chronic stress, so if you have a burglar breaking into your house and your body's sounding the alarms, it's going to prioritize cortisol and protection over sex hormones and reproduction, because survival is always going to come before reproduction. So if you're constantly producing cortisol and your stress hormone, you're going to start to deplete those sex hormones. I show a chart to pretty much every patient, and certainly when we're working on the HPA axis, that is showing the flow of pregnenolone, that precursor hormone, into your other sex and stress hormones. And so many patients are like, oh, I get it now. And that's why women under chronic stress lose their periods, see their libido tank, or feel their hair thinning. It's not just that the ovaries have stopped working, it's that the HPA axis is telling the body, we don't have reserves for both survival and reproduction. When your sympathetic nervous system is on overdrive and you're in that fight or flight state, you're going to upregulate the stress response and deal with that stressor so you don't die, and you're going to downregulate your sex hormones. I will see this in labs time and time again, and this is why I always check pregnenolone. So let me share a story with you. A woman in her 30s came in to see me about a year after her son was born, and she told me that she felt like a stranger in her own body. She had weight gain that would not budge no matter what she did. She was dieting, she was exercising, and she was exhausted. Even though she was going to bed at 10 p.m. and waking up at 7 a.m., and her son was actually sleeping really well through the night, she woke feeling unrefreshed. By mid afternoon, she would hit a wall and feel like she just had to nap, even though she also had to push through the day and mom. Her hair was coming out in clumps in the shower, and she had cystic acne. And her periods were irregular. They were super heavy since having her son, and this was really disruptive for her. She was already on Synthroid for hypothyroidism, which she had been told to take during her pregnancy, and she wasn't sure if she should keep taking it or not. She wasn't sure if it was Hashimoto's or autoimmune in nature. She didn't really know. She just was still taking it. And she was taking Zoloft for postpartum anxiety and seeing a therapist weekly. And when she saw her gynecologist about the heavy periods, she was told just go back on birth control. And this was the same prescription that she'd been given as a teenager. But here's something that no one had checked. No one had looked into her iron stores. So she had fatigue, right? Hair loss, heavy periods, all classic red flags for low ferritin. Her ferritin came back when I ran it at an 11. That's profoundly low. I've seen it lower. It's something that I see low in so many women that walk through my door. She also had come to me having had some blood work done already. The ferritin, I ran with her, but she had run her prolactin, which was elevated, her DHEAS, her adrenal reserve marker, which was low for her age, and she had an elevated high sensitivity CRP, or C-reactive protein, an inflammatory marker that we've definitely talked about before on the podcast. And still, the solution that she was offered before she came to me was birth control. She told me in tears how she'd gone to every specialist on her fertility journey, and then even more specialists recently with these heavy periods, and still wasn't getting any answers. No one looked at how her body was all connected or whether her orchestra was in tune. She was just handed the same pill in her 20s and her 30s without any curiosity or critical thinking about what her body actually needed. This is why I say don't medicate a deficiency, decode the signal. Listen to the body. The body speaks and the body heals. Her body wasn't asking for more hormones. It was asking for her HPA axis to be restored. It was asking for inflammation to be reduced and for her iron stores to be rebuilt, for her nervous system to feel safe again. That's terrain medicine. And this is where that word psychoneuroendocrinoimmunology, or PNEI, some practitioners rotate it into PINE. This is where that web comes in. Your thoughts and your perceptions feed into your nervous system. Your nervous system directs your endocrine glands. Your endocrine system influences your immune system, and your immune system feeds right back into your brain and your gut. If you want to deep dive into this, I highly recommend the book Molecules of Emotion by Candace Pert. And when I read that book, it was a big aha moment for me back in med school in about 2010, I would say. And we have even more research on this now, but I'll put that in the show notes. It's such a great book to understand this concept. But essentially, it's one big loop. It's all connected. You can't heal one hormone or one organ system in isolation. You just can't. And when stress is chronic or trauma is unprocessed, the hypothalamus is constantly reading and scanning the world as unsafe. This is going to alter your cortisol rhythms, which alters your immune defenses, which alters your microbiome. So high cortisol is actually going to suppress secretory IgA, which is that immune coating in your gut lining. That leaves you vulnerable then to infections. Remember our reactivation episode on EBV last week, to dysbiosis, and to things like food sensitivities. High cortisol is also linked to depression in so many studies, and I see this all of the time clinically. Whereas low cortisol can mean loss of regulation of that HPA axis. The immune system can go into overdrive. That's when we see allergies, autoimmunity, chronic inflammation. You can also struggle with sleep because the conductor isn't cueing melatonin appropriately. Further, when we're talking about all this psycho-neuro-endo-immuno, right? Cytokines, which are inflammatory immune responses, they're released by an inflamed immune system in this situation. So you might see on labs things like IL-6 or interleukin-6 or tumor necrosis factor alpha. And you might also see blunting of your neurotransmitter production. So remember things like serotonin, dopamine, GABA, right, that are going to control mood, motivation, sleep. And you're going to be left feeling anxious, depressed, bone tired. So yes, so many women in midlife experience Epstein-Barr virus reactivation, autoimmune flares, or stubborn fatigue. It's not just bad luck. It's not your body being broken. It is not that you will never feel good again. It is the psycho, neuro, endocrino, immunological web in action. It is everything connected in action. And this is why one of the 4 pillars of the Vital Spirit method is stress response and resilience and focusing on this HPA axis. Because if you don't restore safety to the nervous system, your hormones will always be downstream casualties. So yes, you might catch me rolling my eyes a bit when someone asks, do you think I need hormone replacement therapy? Because it's so much more complicated than that. And that's why I'm here, to highlight that there is so much more that can be done to feel amazing. And if that's the right choice, then it's at the top of the therapeutic order and pyramid. And that decision can be made with a trusted practitioner. Now, we can't deep dive into the HPA axis without also talking about the gut-liver-thyroid axis. And another piece that really often gets overlooked is clearance. So you can go back to episode 4, why healing your gut is the first step to hormone balance. You can go back to our episodes on emunctories and why drainage comes before detox. But essentially, your gut and your liver are not just digestive organs. They are hormone pathways. Your gut and your liver are absolutely key to hormone balance. That is why we work on them before we work on our hormones. When your body is done using estrogen, your liver conjugates it, so it packages it, and it sends it to the gut for elimination. But if you're constipated, so you're not moving stool through, and if your bile isn't flowing, and if your gut bacteria make too much beta-glucuronidase, which we talked about in our gut hormone episode, then those estrogens get deconjugated and recycled back into circulation. I usually talk about it like I'm using my hands if you're not watching YouTube, and I'm putting my fists together. So there's a bind between toxins or estrogens and a protein. Essentially, there's an enzyme that can go in and break or cleave apart this bind. And when that happens, then you're just going to reabsorb them. They're going to be recycled back into your body. So that can look like acne, PMS, heavy bleeding, mood swings, even when your blood levels of estrogen might look normal. So this is exactly what I saw in the case I shared. Her stool test showed elevated or high beta glucuronidase, and it explained why, despite being told that her hormones were fine, she was still struggling and symptomatic. Now, the thyroid is also deeply linked to the HPA axis, right? And cortisol imbalance impairs the conversion of T4 to T3. Also, low ferritin, remember her ferritin was low, and low selenium can blunt thyroid output. So, stress is going to raise reverse T3, for example. So, high cortisol is essentially going to put the brakes on your thyroid function and prevent conversion of T4 to T3. All that means essentially is that when you have high cortisol output, you typically will have lower thyroid output as well. So, above all of this, kind of overarching all of this, is your circadian rhythm. And that's governed by your hypothalamus and your pineal gland. So, when sleep is irregular, so if you're scrolling at night, if you've got bright lights on, if you've got your TV on, then melatonin is not being released at night, and your cortisol rhythm is going to be off as a result. And both thyroid and sex hormones pay the price. So, yes, everything is all connected, and all of these little daily habits really, really add up. So your period doesn't start in your ovaries, it starts in your brain. Menopause doesn't start in your ovaries, it starts in your brain. And your gut and your liver decide how those hormones are going to stay in circulation or be reabsorbed. So, what do I actually check when someone comes in exhausted, wired, anxious, bloated, stuck in these midlife symptoms, unsure if they should go on hormone replacement therapy? I created what I call the HPA First Lab Panel. So, it's a low cost, high yield lab bundle, and it shows me whether your foundations are strong enough before we even talk about hormone therapy. Here's what it will typically include: pregnenolone, so your resilience marker. It's giving me a glimpse into your neurosteroid reserve. DHEAS or sulfate, so that's your adrenal reserve. And essentially, it balances some of cortisol's effects. A full cortisol curve, so not just one point in time or one serum number when you go in the morning, but your actual rhythm across the day. A full thyroid panel, which all of you listeners know is going to be TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, free T4, free T3, reverse T3, and your thyroid antibodies. A full iron panel with ferritin, please. Hair, energy, oxygen transport depend on it. So many women come to my practice and they have low ferritin and it has not been tested. Please get it tested. Inflammatory markers, so high sensitivity CRP and homocysteine, these are going to give you an idea about how much inflammation is impacting your HPA axis, as well as if your HPA axis is maybe impacting your levels of inflammation. And certainly nutrients like your omega-3 index, your red blood cell magnesium, zinc, selenium, and CoQ10. So these are a great start to understanding the health of your HPA axis. And when a woman's ferritin is at an 11 or even below a 20, and she's told to just take birth control, that's a problem, because no pill is going to fix oxygen starvation. And when your ferritin is low, when your iron starts to go low, your period actually gets heavier. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And if your DHEA is tanked and your pregnenolone is depleted and your cortisol curve is flat, then the solution is not more estrogen. It's restoring the HPA axis. Now, I recognize that things can get complicated when you honor the interconnectedness of the body. To keep it simple, start with one thing every system shares. Where's every system intersecting? That's the nervous system. I look at all my patients through this lens of psychoneuroimmunoendocrinology, how the psyche, the neural and endocrine function, and immune responses shape one another. Through this lens, I can apply naturopathic medicine to allergic, immune, autoimmune, endocrine, cardiovascular, and psychological concerns, but not in silos as one living network. You are one living communicating network. And epigenetic inputs, stressors, they're constantly tuning our neurotransmitters and our hormones. And those are our body's communication systems within that network. So when we view the body as a whole and the underlying causes of many symptoms become clear to us, nearly every time it tells us to lead with healing the nervous system first. The gut-brain axis, the HPA axis. This is true root cause medicine. The simplest doorway into healing the nervous system is the vagus nerve. That's why I talk about it so much. Remember, it's that 10th cranial nerve. It's the main highway of the parasympathetic nervous system. That's the rest, digest, and heal state. It's balancing the fight, flight, freeze of the sympathetic nervous system. And because the vagus nerve is bidirectional, brain to body and body to brain, it anchors the gut brain axis and influences mood, immune tone, digestion, and heart rate. So if you can support vagal tone, you can shift a lot quickly. So go back to our episode on this for more, but some simple ways to stimulate the vagus nerve are going to be deep, slow, diaphragmatic breathing, singing, humming, chanting, gargling, meditation and present moment awareness, cold exposure. You can splash your face with cold water or finish your shower with cold, exercise and gentle massage, socializing and laughing with others, co-regulation, right? And you can consider transcutaneous vagus nerve stimulation. So some patients do want something to stimulate their vagus nerve, or something like the Safe and Sound protocol, which again, we have an episode on. You can also do the basic exercise, which I talk about a lot, which is just clasping your hands behind your head so they're just at the base of your skull. And then you're going to look left with your eyes, not move your head, and you're going to hold there. And then you come back to center and you look right with your eyes and not move your head. And essentially, you're going to hold in both directions until you yawn or you feel your body relax. I sped through that explanation, so I'll come back to it in another episode. But essentially, in naturopathic medicine, healing begins with removing those obstacles to cure, right? And providing a healing state to the body. And these exercises and just being aware around vagal tone in the nervous system are such a great place for you to start. So yes, we're going to remove inflammatory foods. We're going to address unhealthy stress or coping mechanisms or patterns. We're going to focus on digestive dysfunction at first, address poor sleep habits or toxic exposures, socioeconomic stressors, trauma, right? You clear these obstacles to cure and you watch vitality rise. That's the body's self-healing mechanisms able to finally do their job. And a chronically imbalanced nervous system is truly a major obstacle to cure. Many of us really do live in that sympathetic overdrive, and the gas pedal is stuck on fight or flight. And that pushes the HPA axis and gut brain axis into stress mode. It elevates cortisol and adrenaline, it suppresses immunity, and it drives inflammation. So this is why stress flares digestion, lowers resilience, and can feed your anxiety, depression, pain, and sleep issues. So yes, we have to strengthen our parasympathetic brakes. I will talk about this all day, every day, because it is so important. It is what allows rest, digestion, tissue repair. Without a working brake on your parasympathetic nervous system, healing cannot stick. So again, some daily ways to train and balance this might be breathing, long, slow exhales, movement, yoga, dance, time in nature, getting out in the sun, getting that input from the sun that, yes, it's time to wake up and make cortisol, or now it's time to make melatonin. And you do that by getting darkness at night, right? It's not that complicated, but it is so important. Co-regulation, again, being around safe humans, hugging, making oxytocin, petting your pets, mindfulness, being present in the moment, right? And certainly I might be using botanical medicine and homeopathy, maybe nervines, adaptogens, and this is all going to be very individualized when we get down to supplementation or herbal medicine or homeopathy. I'm going to talk more about these in part 2 of this episode. So why don't you think a little bit around how you will support your nervous system today to create an optimal environment for healing and support that complicated web of the HPA axis and the psychoneuroendocrino-immunology of your body? And as you think about that, I just want to do a quick little tiny reset practice with you. So we'll take a minute to do a little vagus nerve reset. I'm going to have you just sit comfortably. So I'm going to do it as well. So you're going to sit tall, one hand on your heart and one hand on your belly. And you're going to inhale through the nose for a count of 4. Ready? Inhale. And then you're going to exhale through pursed lips, almost like you're exhaling out a straw for a count of 6 to 8. I won't breathe as much because it's probably annoying. So you're going to inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Exhale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then you can hum gently on the exhale of your last breath. So you're going to inhale, 2, 3, 4, and hum. Hum. You should feel a little warm and buzzy. If you are somewhere where you can splash some cool water on your face, you could do that really quickly after this practice as well. And you can just keep your hand on your heart or your belly or both, and you can just say, safe and here, safe and here, safe and here. And you can notice one thing you can see, one thing you can hear, and one thing you can feel. Now, that's a super quick exercise, right? But you can use that grounding practice anytime, before meals, at 3 p.m. before you pick your kids up, right before bed. And this will re-cue that parasympathetic rest, digest, and heal nervous system. So remember, the HPA axis is the control tower for your hormones, your thyroid, your energy, and your immune system. If you don't start here, you'll always be chasing symptoms downstream. This is why when women ask me if they should try HRT, I often say, maybe. We have to prepare the terrain first, though. In part 2 of this series, I'll walk you through how I interpret the HPA First Lab panel, what it means when these markers are off, and the practical steps I use to restore balance. We'll also zoom out to the spiritual physiology of the hypothalamus, pituitary, and pineal gland, and we'll talk about how your hormones are as much about meaning and safety in life as they are about biochemistry. So if this resonated with you, check out my free lab interpretation guide. It's the exact list of labs I run for women who feel wired, tired, but foggy. And you can grab it in the show notes. You can also download my free vagal tone guide for more vagal toning exercises. And just remember that you deserve so much more than a prescription. You deserve a map of your terrain. And as always, this episode is sponsored by my clinic, Roots Deep Medicine, and the Vital Spirit Method. So please download, subscribe, and review if you feel so inclined. It's how it will reach more women. And hit share to send it to someone who you think might benefit from this knowledge. Have a great day.